Before we dive in today, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that today's conversation covers a deeply emotional topic: pregnancy loss. October is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, and I know this topic may touch many of you personally. My guest today, Andrea Clark, is the Deputy CEO of Postpartum Support International. She's also a mother who experienced multiple losses before welcoming her son, her rainbow baby, in 2013. In our conversation, Andrea shares her journey through grief, what she wishes more people understood about pregnancy loss, and how we can better support the parents and families who walk this heartbreaking road. Whether you've personally experienced loss or want to better understand how to show up for someone who has, this episode is filled with empathy, honesty, and hope. So I hope you'll join me. Hi, I'm Allison Egidi, a pediatric sleep and wellness coach and a mom of two. I love to help parents find solutions. This is How Long Till Bedtime. Well, hi, Andrea. Thank you so much for joining me today to discuss this really, really important topic. October is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, and I'm so grateful that you're here to share both your own story and your professional insight. I always like to start by asking my guests what inspired them to pursue their vocation. And I know that your career path has a deeply personal story, so I would love for you to share it.
Oh, thank you so much, and for having me here, Allison. And also thank you for uh, talking about this topic because it's a topic that I know is part of my story, but also that I felt like I lived alone, isolated, and like nobody really wanted to hear that what was going on. So, to start, I have had many, many careers, and my story kind of starts in the middle of my career. I was a practicing attorney, and my former husband and I, I'm no longer married, but my former husband and I waited until about 5 years into our marriage to start trying to have children. And as luck would have it, we got pregnant right away. And I was very excited. That felt right in line with who I felt that I was. Like I'm an overachiever. I'm a high achiever. So getting pregnant right away after trying for not that long was amazing. And somewhere into the fifth week of that pregnancy, I started bleeding. I went to the emergency room, and the doctor says, "Oh no, everything looks okay. You sometimes this happens. This is your first pregnancy. Sometimes this happens. Women bleed." Only to have my OB send me for a 3D ultrasound a couple weeks later because the bleeding had not stopped, and the doctor told me that the baby had stopped growing at 6 weeks, although I was supposed to be 10. And so then after that, I felt compelled, right? Still practicing law, was a labor attorney here in Chicago, and I felt compelled to try again because it felt like a failure. It felt like this is something that women have been doing from the beginning of time, and I'm not able to do it. No, 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 no. I'm going to try again. And then that second pregnancy was a chemical pregnancy.
Mm.
Um, and so I ended up, there was no actual embryo fetus like growing. Although there was a sac, it was empty, and I was having all the pregnancy symptoms, but wasn't really pregnant. And so that spun me into, I think, a really deep depression. Um, and I didn't realize it at the time
Mm-hmm.
because what I was angry.
Yes.
I was angry with my body. I had grown up in church and still was attending church, and I was angry with God. I was angry with every woman I saw with the stroller or with the
Mm.
pregnant belly. I was angry with my husband. I was angry. And to mask that, I started drinking like heavily. And it got to the point where my husband was really concerned. Um, and I don't recall the exact circumstances, but a friend, or and not even a friend, an associate, kind of reached out to me just to see how I was doing. She didn't know anything about the pregnancy. She just saw me kind of spinning out of control, drinking all the time. Knowing that she'd seen my husband and I out in public, and it seemed like there was stress there. So she just kind of checked on me. And it's kind of when I broke down and
Mm.
said, you know, I think that I'm really hurting from these losses, and I'm so mad at everybody, including myself. I don't know what to do. And I'm mad at God. And she kind of reassured me that God still loved me and God was waiting for me to come back. And none of that was meant to hurt me, although God didn't cause the losses. That God still loved me and cared for me. And so I kind of started to reintegrate myself into my religion. It was a way that I really coped and made sense of something for myself that did not make sense. And then shortly thereafter, I got pregnant again. And this time my marriage was in a good place. My mental health, I felt like I was excited. We hadn't been trying. I felt like, oh, this is like God blessing me, the universe sending me, this message that it's your time. And then we saw the heartbeat at 7 weeks and was so excited. And then my doctor had me coming in every 2 weeks because of my history. And then at the 9 or 10 week visit, she looked for the heartbeat and it wasn't there anymore.
Mm.
And so for the third time in a row, I had lost the baby. And I had decided previously before, like I had DNCs. I didn't want to wait for my body to naturally expel. This time I did not do that. I had some medicine she gave me so that I would go into essentially contractions so the products of conception would come out. And she asked me, this is going to happen at home. If you can you recover the products and bring them in so that we can examine them?
Oh, wow.
And so I remember, waking up because I had gone to sleep. I was having contractions, but she gave me pain medicine. So I fell asleep, and about 4 in the morning, I woke up in pain, blood everywhere. And I knew that, that the baby was coming as I was thinking of it. And so we went to the bathroom. I remember running around frantically saying to my ex-husband, like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm making a mess. And he just told me to calm down. He went to the kitchen and got the little specimen cup and brought me like a big spoon because we had to get the whatever it was out of the toilet. And so he was going to do it. And I was like, no, let me do it. I'm the mommy.
Mm.
That was my only opportunity ever at that point to hold one of my babies.
Mhm.
And then to put my baby in a cup
Oh.
and take my baby the next day to the doctor. And that there was a lot of complications after that I did not expect. I had retained products of conception. I was hemorrhaging. I ended up in the hospital. Ended up on a leave from work for a couple months. But I think that what that sparked in me was this desire. I felt very alone because I didn't know anybody else who had gone through it. My mother had not, and she really struggled with how to support me. My mother in law had not. And as people are wont to do when they're trying to make you feel better, but they don't know what to
Mhm.
say some things, that kind of offhanded that I know she didn't mean as harmful, but kind of like, well, I was in my early 30s. And she's like, well, this is why we don't wait until 30 to have a baby,
Oh.
and things like that. But I knew that I didn't want anybody else to experience what I was feeling.
Mhm.
Fast forward a couple of years, I never went to a support group. I tried counseling for it. It was just too painful. I couldn't get through like the counseling, but I fast forward a couple of years was discerning that I was feeling called to ministry. So I left the practice of law to go back to seminary full time. And part of what we had to do in seminary was internships. And so I knew I wanted to do something with counseling, and I didn't know what. Our field ed director said, you should try to go into like do the internship in the hospital. And I said, no way, because my history with hospitals, I just didn't like them. But I ended up doing it anyway as a chaplain, and fell in love with the work of chaplaincy, but also with being able, that desire that I had to accompany people through this difficult experience that not a lot of people understand, how to just be present, how not to say stuff that is trite and hurtful. I got the opportunity to be that person. And so I ended up from the internship going into chaplaincy for 6 years, and that was my primary responsibility, was to accompany those families through loss or medical fragility. I was a chaplain for the NICU, and not just the families but also the professionals who care for the families, because those kind of things are hard on them as well.
Sure.
And so then that led me to Postpartum Support International, that this wonderful organization that does all this work in the perinatal mental health space, but also and including supporting families who've experienced perinatal loss. So I came as a director of the Alliance for People of Color, and now am the deputy chief executive officer. And I feel like that it's a full circle moment, and really feel like this is I did eventually get pregnant. I left my precious boy out. I'm sorry. I got pregnant as soon as I left the practice of law. A month later I found out I was pregnant.
Oh, wow.
Yes, in 2013, with my little boy who will be 12 in a matter of days, and my rainbow baby. That was a wonderful pregnancy. The delivery was a little weird, but it was a wonderful pregnancy. He is healthy and bright and full of personality, knows that he has siblings in heaven. He's an only child. We didn't have any others after him, but he is amazing. And so it both because he is like the light of my world, and the ones that I didn't get to meet, and the little one I only got to hold in a spoon. I felt like my life and my work is to honor my children.
Amazing and hard to even hear the story is so heartbreaking. So, I'm curious, how long was the window where you lost the 3 babies?
It was like a year and a half, 2 year window.
So pretty short, really, to have so much tragedy in
Yes.
such a short time.
Yeah, and with no answers too, because we went to a specialist with my current miscarriage, and she said I can't find anything wrong. There was nothing wrong with the samples that she had. There was nothing wrong with my husband took tests. I took tests, and so without the answers, that I think that's the hard part.
And so how stressed were you when you were expecting your son? Were you just on pins and needles the whole pregnancy?
Yeah, well, I think that because my losses were early, and I hadn't started working in the hospital yet, right? You think that once you get past a certain point, most people don't tell people until the beginning of the second trimester, that I had never made it that far.
Mm.
So I was on pins and needles really up until probably about week 20. And
Mhm.
like, oh, it's smooth sailing from here, right? Not knowing how much other stuff still has to go right in order for you to have a healthy baby. But I was nervous to tell anybody. I think we told our parents maybe at 16 weeks, but we didn't tell anybody else before that. And then I had just started a new job, like part-time job, and the job was gracious and gave me time off, even though they didn't have to, because I hadn't been there for a long time. So I was just happy.
Mhm.
20 weeks, my little bump was poking out, and at that point I was happy, but yes, I was nervous all the way up until that point.
How do you think those early experiences of losing your 3 babies shaped your understanding of grief and resilience?
Yeah, I remember thinking and really feeling like I didn't give myself space and time. First of all, it was this idea of I got to get back up on the horse and keep trying, right? And I didn't give myself space, but I also feel like people didn't give me space.
Mhm.
You know, the things that people say, like, well, at least you didn't meet the baby, or at least it was early, or you're still young enough to have other children, you know, it made it feel like this was an inconsequential thing.
Mhm.
And so you should keep moving forward. And so what I learned about grief during that period is that any loss or any transition, right, in life, there's grief attached to that loss, because whether or not I held the baby or saw my stomach start to grow, um, from the time I found out I was pregnant, that was my baby.
Mhm.
And I already had started attaching hopes to like what my family was going to look like. And so that I learned that I have the right to grieve any loss. I have the right to grieve even the loss of my expectations and the loss of my hope
Mhm.
as a result of anything that happens. But I also found that in terms of resilience, it took me a minute to get to the point where that pain transitioned into something that I felt like was productive. I think it initially, I thought resilience was you fail, you get up, you try again, because that's what you do in every other aspect of life, right? And I really think that what I've learned is that resilience requires you to acknowledge the hurt, the brokenness, the pain, right? Because you can't heal what you won't deal with,
Mhm.
and that nobody has the right to tell you um, how to do that, for how long, but that is a necessary part of the process to stop and acknowledge that you're hurting.
That makes a lot of sense. And as I'm listening to you, I just think, yeah, classic overachiever. I mean, so many of the things that you're doing as someone, I think I'm the same way. It's like you fall off the horse, you get back on. And the reality is once I fell off a horse and I broke my neck and I still got back on and it could have killed me. So it's like sometimes we need to not
Mm-hmm.
do that, but so many of us are trained
Mm-hmm.
to do that, to be tough, and I think sometimes particularly as women
Yep.
that keep going, keep going. So, you've mentioned that you were angry and you felt isolated during this time and that people really did not say the right things. I'm curious what you wish more people understood about that emotional toll of pregnancy loss.
I wish that more people understood that a loss is a loss. And though people can understand more so when they are able to see external evidence of pregnancy, right?
Mhm.
Or if a woman is forced to deliver because it's further along, and or something happens, like people tend to understand that more. But still, even in those situations, right? A lot of people don't want to acknowledge the loss of something significant because the child did not live that long, right? You weren't able to parent that child. But what you have to understand is that for a lot of us, from the moment that we find out that we're pregnant, there's a relationship
Mhm.
that starts with that little person, right? That little person is a part of who you are. And I think people do the best that they can a lot of times in their own discomfort with such a sensitive kind of grief,
Mhm.
that they minimize and try to make people feel better by minimizing that grief. But you have to let people allow people to feel what they feel. And if you are not capable of doing that and being present and sometimes understanding that there is no word that you're going to give somebody that is going to make this pain feel better, but a lot of times just knowing that you're present enough to care, and not say anything, and let them cry or let them talk about the hopes that they had, if you're able to do that. If you're not, then then you shouldn't. But if you can offer that if you can offer something to anyone who's going through this experience or has gone through it, let them talk about the pain, or let them talk about the hopes, or let them talk about say their names. A lot of times, we've come up with names for our children, or if you've had to deliver, you have to name the child, right? And so, recognize significant milestones that that child would have gone through, right? If the parent is willing and wanting to do that, right? It's that child is forever a part of their family structure.
Mhm.
Right. And as much as they integrate that child into the narrative of their family, into the traditions, honor that, honor that with them.
Yeah, I think I personally have not experienced a pregnancy loss, and while I know so many people have, I'm listening to you and thinking about it from the perspective of those of us who haven't, and I think we're probably the group that say the dumb things. The people that have not sat in that type of grief, and, I think a big aim of this podcast is to help people have solutions and to give them tools. And so when you think about it from the perspective of people like me who have not experienced loss, and then your friend or your coworker, or as you've pointed out, a relative, says that they've experienced loss, what would be your recommendation on the very first thing to say? Is it just to say, I'm so terribly sorry, and to let them lead? Or is it our job to then ask follow-up questions? What do you think is the most helpful thing someone can do when they hear this news?
Yeah, I do think that you meet the person where they are and you let them guide the conversation. So it's always okay to say I'm terribly sorry for your loss, or I'm so sorry to hear that. Um, and to allow for them to address it or to continue the conversation. And, sometimes in order to minimize it or to make the other person feel better, what someone might say, yeah, it's one of these things that happens all the time. And for you just to be reassuring to that person, well, I'm very sorry that it happened to you.
Mhm.
What kind of support have you gotten for this, right? What kind of support have you gotten? Do you
Mhm.
know have other people in your life or your circle who have experienced this? Do you know about support groups if they're open to that? And they'll tell you if they're not. But to also reassure them that I'm very sorry that this happened to you. And what kind of support have you gotten, or did you get? Is there anything that I can do?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
And you mentioned this friend or acquaintance, sounds like it wasn't even a really close friend, which immediately, like, sparks my interest, kind of extended you, it almost sounds like a lifeline when you were at a really low point, and it makes me curious about that. Was that a big turning point for you where you were able to kinda shift from this angry spot or feeling like you were in despair to healing because you suddenly had someone who allowed you to feel seen? And the reason I'm curious is I talk about this a lot for new moms when I encourage people just check in on the new moms, even if you think they're fine. Check in. I'm checking in on you. And I'm curious if you have thoughts on that and how that was impactful to you, just because it might be a reminder to everyone the importance of checking in, and you don't have to be their best friend to check in.
That's exactly right. No, she wasn't. She's somebody who I knew and I was friendly with, and we kind of had same people in the same circles, but not somebody who I was terribly close to. And so her checking, and I don't even, like I said, she didn't know about the losses. She had just noticed like some things that I was doing when we were out, or like me not showing up certain places. And so I don't know what pricked her heart. I want to say it was God or some other divine intervention that kind of just pricked her heart to check on me. And my initial response to her was like, "Nah, I'm okay. I'm good."
Mm,
And it was that very gentle but unrelenting, like, but how are you really?
mm,
that said, oh, maybe she's picking up on something, that I'm not quite aware of how I'm like appearing and showing up in the world. And so then I told her, I know I'm not really good, that this is what's been happening with me over the last couple of years. And her not having any children and never having been pregnant or having had a loss either, knew that for me, my faith was a strong way for me to cope, and that there was anger there. And so we kind of talked about that.
Mhm.
But even I think about my my mother talking about how helpless she felt, after knowing that this happened, and she was miles and miles away, because she lived in Las Vegas at the time when I had this. But her calling me every day just to say how you doing. I'm sending you, like, sent me. My mother is famous for care packages. When I was in college, she sent everybody in my house I lived in got a care package for every holiday, right? So sending me little care packages, with like just notes letting me know that she loved me, um, and thinking about other friends who have gone through similar things, and just saying, even if they don't, I'm just calling to check on you. And even if you don't want to talk about, the loss, like, you want to go get some ice cream, or can I bring over some coffee? You want to watch something that has nothing to do with this? Or you want to watch like some crazy reality TV? You want to watch The Housewives or something? I'm
Mhm.
over and bring some ice cream and cookies, and let's have a girls' night in. Or you want to get out and let's go for a walk, those kinds of things. And but making sure that you're checking in with people. Yeah, she really was a lifeline for me.
I mean, amazing. It's just such a good example that you can be so impactful on someone's life, even if they are not your family member or your nearest, dearest friend. I leading up to this conversation, I polled my community on Instagram, and 100% of the people who responded said that they only told close family and friends about their pregnancy loss. And that struck me because I thought, wow, that's a isolating experience right there, and made me realize how many women are truly suffering or mourning in silence. And I think it's probably especially true for the high achieving working moms who feel this pressure to keep it all together, that they shouldn't be taking time off work because, to your example, they weren't even showing yet. And they don't want people to be uncomfortable. I'm curious your thoughts on why pregnancy loss seems to still remain such an isolating experience for people.
Yeah, I think part of it is I can speak from my own kind of experience, and then some things that I've heard. When I worked as a chaplain, I worked. Part of what I did was help to support our bereavement social worker, and we ran a perinatal loss support group. For parents, for both parents could come. But I know for me, it was this sense of failure, right? It's this sense of, especially people who have not gone through this, feeling like other people can do this thing that I cannot do. And this is such
Mhm.
a basic thing. I remember thinking that they're teenagers, right? I had
Yeah.
coworkers who were getting pregnant that did not want any more children. And so there's a shame associated with it. Um, and partially, I think, because part of kind of societally, whether we say it out loud or not anymore, right? The expectation is that this is part of what makes you a woman, right? This is part of what makes you a woman. And so there was the shame associated with not being able to do this thing that women for decades have been able to do, and not knowing like why.
Mhm.
A lot of times not knowing why I can't do this thing. And then it's also because it is, even though we know that probably 20% of pregnancies end in miscarriage, it might be higher than that. Sometimes it's a miscarriage and people don't know that they've miscarried, right? Especially earlier on. But it's also this thing of not wanting to make other people feel uncomfortable, because it's a different thing if you have a parent or a spouse that has passed away. It's painful as well, but there is some ability to reflect on their life, and you get to spend time and all of those things, and people don't know how to comfort or what to say to people who have had this kind of loss, where you don't have that same kind of they presume attachment, and that same longevity of relationship. And so then what do you say? Right. And so, because a lot of times what we found, or we would say all the time to our parents in that support group, is that it's not your job to make other people feel comfortable with your grief. But a lot of times we think that it is.
Mhm.
And because there's silence around it, like, you don't know, you think you're the only one going through it. And you're not. We always used to say, this is, in the support group, this is a club that we sincerely wish there were never any other members of, but that they had one another in that space, because they could all relate to what it felt like, to experience this kind of loss and this grief. One of the people who helped me immensely to take my cape off and put the achievement down, believe it or not, was my boss when I was practicing law. He's probably about 15, 20 years older than me, white man.
Mhm.
And I had come from the doctor. He knew that I had the first loss because I had come from the doctor, and I just couldn't work. And I went in and told him. And I said, I think I need the rest of the day off. He said, you need to take the rest of the week off. Right. And then after the second loss, when I was hospitalized, going back and forth from the hospital because I was hemorrhaging and there was all these things going wrong, and I came back to work on pain pills, like sitting at my desk, and he knocked on my door in my office, and he was like, "You're better? You're okay?" And I said, "Yeah." And I'm like this,
Mhm.
and he said, he closed the door. He was like, "My wife and I have been through this."
Mm. I was gonna ask if he had experienced it, and this is why he did so well.
He said, "We've been through this." And he said, "You're not okay.
Mm.
I need you to call HR and get FMLA paperwork started, because you need to take a leave. Even if your body feels better, I know that your heart is hurting. And that's a legitimate reason for you to take a leave. The stuff will be here."
I love him.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
His compassion, it made me have more compassion for myself in that moment.
Mhm.
And that leave was probably, I took a month, and that was probably the best thing I could have done for myself at that time.
Yeah, so I love hearing that because it's again speaks to the power that we do have to help people. The other thing that came up when I polled people was that their desire was to grieve in private. So that they it was the question was, did you wanna grieve in private? Do you wish you could have talked about it more? I can't remember. We have, like, 4 or 5 options, and most of them said they wanted to grieve in private.
Mhm.
And I guess I'm thinking about I can appreciate that a lot of people don't wanna go to the office, and
Mhm.
even if people are gonna say the right thing, sometimes you just don't want pity from everyone. I think
Mhm.
sometimes the high achievers really don't want people's pity. Um, but you do need to talk about it. And you've mentioned support groups. And
Mhm.
so I would love for you to share for any woman who's gone through a loss, who maybe hasn't worked through it, but doesn't want to just go and, tell all of her friends or tell her coworkers. What are other options to allow them to talk to people who are not gonna give the offensive response or to kind of take away some of the wild card aspect of sharing.
No, yeah, that's a great. I'm glad you asked that question, because those are things that I did not do. First of all, I think acknowledge that it's okay for you to want to talk about it. I didn't think that it was minimized from other folks to such an extent that my grief was, or that you shouldn't be so sad about this. Why are you so sad about this? That I didn't seek any support. But I know at a lot of local hospitals or in the hospital network in areas that there are support group and support services that some are exclusively for the birthing parent, but some are for the birthing parent and partner. Some, even in the group that we had, we also welcomed other family members. So sometimes we would have like the parents of the couple that had lost a baby. We had the grandparents came in sometimes, and it was fine. It was a closed group. It was, I mean, it was an open group, so people could come and, as they needed to. And so those resources exist in a lot of hospitals or hospital networks, but also at Postpartum Support International, where I work. We have virtual support groups that are completely free. We have support groups for people who've experienced pregnancy loss at different stages. We have support for Black moms in loss. We have support groups for um, moms in loss, for um, early pregnancy loss, for termination for medical reasons. And then we have support groups where the couple, the family can come together if they want to both come. And then we also have a dad's only support group. And so those are spaces where they do become their own kind of little community, but they're bonded by this commonality of that experience and knowing what that's like. The support groups are all led by people who have lived experience with whatever the topic of that group is. And so you're not talking to somebody who hasn't been through it. They're extensively trained. But those resources exist. And then there are providers who, I'm also a psychotherapist, a therapist as well. And so this is one of my specialty areas. And on Postpartum Support International's website, you will find that there's a provider directory and you can see the areas of specialty. So one-on-one therapy, but also these free kind of group resources that are virtual. I believe they meet weekly, become their own spaces, and then people develop relationships in those spaces that sort of become like mentorships, peer mentorships, and buddy outside of the actual support groups. Right, you have somebody you can talk to. Postpartum Support International also has what we call a peer mentor program, and so that is if you don't want to go into a support group, but you want to be able to have somebody check in with you one on one. And there are specific peer mentors that are trained, who have lived experience with pregnancy loss, that are trained to accompany people they meet virtually, or they text, or they check in with one another. And Postpartum Support International will connect you with those people as well.
I never cease to be amazed by all the resources that Postpartum Support International has to offer, and this is even though I have shared Postpartum Support International with people so many times, you're mentioning several options that I was not aware of, so I'm really glad that you were able to speak to those today. What is the best way for people to find that? Is it just to go through the website? Is there a specific page on the website that will get them pointed in the right direction?
Sure. So our website is postpartum.net. And then there's a tab at the top that says Get Help. And then you'll see a tab for Find a Support Group. And then there's a drop down. We have over 50 support groups that are there. The number for our helpline is also there. And so if there are other resources, our helpline will connect you with a local volunteer or volunteer in your state that is familiar with local resources. And you can connect with that as well. Or also, we have an app which has all of the information that is on the website. It's called Connect by PSI. You can download it in the Apple Store or the Google Play Store as well.
Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you for sharing your story. It's incredibly powerful, and even just your whole professional journey, I find really inspiring. And I have no doubt you have helped countless women. Before we wrap up, I'd just love to know, what would you like to leave everyone with? Is there something you want all women who have experienced loss to know, or someone who's struggling right now, something you want them to know?
Yeah, I would like for anyone who is struggling, who's experienced this, is that I know this feels like a lonely space, and I know it feels like no one understands, and I know sometimes it can feel like you're the only one, and that you feel like this is unfair. And I'm going to just say for you that it is unfair. And to validate all of the feelings that you're feeling, whether it be anger, deep sadness, depression, or numbness, right? That you have a right to feel what you feel, and don't let anybody tell you that you don't, and don't tell yourself that you don't or that you shouldn't. Allow yourself to feel all the feelings. Allow yourself to move through. Grief will become a part of you. Grief does not go away. Your relationship to it just transforms over time, right? And so I know that that grief of losing my babies is always going to be a part of who I am, but now it's a part of me that I can function and live with, and you can get to that point too, but let yourself be helped, and connect to some of these resources and connect to some people so that you'll know, like in our support groups, you'll there's a living witness to the fact that you are not alone, and that in time you're not going to get over this, but you'll be able to walk through it, and that grief will be transformed for you.
Thank you again so much. I will be sure to link to these resources in the show notes. And thank you for the incredibly important work that you do, and for helping families know that they are not alone. And it was a pleasure chatting with you today.
Same here. Thank you so much, Allison.
All right, bye for now.
All right, bye bye.
Thank you for listening to How Long Till Bedtime. To learn how we can work together to improve your child's sleep, please visit sleepandwellnesscoach.com.